It's curious, really, how a single quiet afternoon can upend everything you thought was certain. How something as delicate as the whisper of leaves outside your window or the muffled chords of a song drifting down a hallway can conspire with fate to steer your life someplace wholly unexpected. Looking back, I often wonder if it was always destined to unfold that way, or if it was simply one of those cruel, accidental turns that life delights in orchestrating. It was a Sunday. Just another Sunday, or so it seemed. The kind that wears a hush like a soft old shawl draped over its shoulders. Our house had settled into that gentle stillness I'd always found comforting, though on that day, it pulsed with something just beneath the surface. A promise, or perhaps a warning. Daniel, my husband, had decided almost on a whim to head out fishing with some college buddies. They hadn't done that in years, so when he left that morning with a grin and a playful salute, I only smiled, happy he'd found some slice of boyish joy. And so it was just me and Mason left to inhabit the quiet spaces of our home. Mason, my stepson, 22. Yet sometimes he carried himself with the deliberate calm of a man twice that. He had a strong build, shoulders that suggested a natural sort of authority, and an inwardness about him that, paradoxically, always drew people closer. Over the years, we'd managed something rare for stepfamilies, a gentle understanding, a peace forged in countless small moments, washing dishes side by side, laughing at a badly dubbed movie, or simply driving home in silence after a late grocery run. It wasn't forced. It never had been. And that, I think, was why it felt so precious. That morning I let myself drift from room to room, performing the soft rituals of keeping a house alive, folding sun-warmed laundry, straightening a lopsided picture of Daniel and Mason from a camping trip long ago, running my hand across countertops until they gleamed. Somewhere above me, faint currents of bass spilled from Mason's bedroom, the subtle heartbeat of another life unfolding just upstairs. It was oddly reassuring. A reminder I wasn't entirely alone. When my chores finally dwindled, I poured a tall glass of iced tea, its cold beads sweating against my palm, and stood by the kitchen window. Sunlight spilled through, pooling across my bare arms, drawing out tiny freckles I'd nearly forgotten. I should have felt content. Everything about the scene suggested I ought to be. A clean house, a peaceful afternoon. The low throb of music upstairs like a lullaby. But something restless stirred inside me, a soft electrical hum beneath my skin that refused to be quiet. And almost before I understood why, I set the glass down. I drifted from the sunlit kitchen, barefoot across the cool wooden floor, drawn by an impulse I couldn't quite name, toward the staircase, toward that gentle throb of bass and whatever waited beyond. I've replayed that moment countless times. The hush of the house wrapping around me. The way my hand lightly grazed the banister as I ascended. Each creak of the old steps seemed to echo a question I wasn't brave enough to voice. By the time I reached the top landing, my pulse had quickened, though for reasons I couldn't then begin to admit. Maybe it was the spell of the afternoon itself. The way the light pooled in unexpected places, turning familiar walls into something secretive. Or perhaps it was the simple fact of being unobserved, untethered from my usual sense of roles and responsibilities. Whatever it was, that day marked a hinge in my life, an invisible pivot on which so much would quietly swing. And even now, long after the dust of that summer has settled, I find myself haunted by that hour. By the ease with which ordinary moments can slip their moorings and sail off into uncharted waters. By how tenderly and terrifyingly our lives can change, without so much as a sound to announce it. I share this not because it's easy, not because it flatters me, but because the weight of that afternoon has never fully lifted. Perhaps by spilling these thoughts into words, by letting them breathe here on this page, I might inch a little closer to understanding. Or, at the very least, forgive myself for the fragile human heart that beat so wildly in that still house on a Sunday that, at first glance, looked like any other. I found myself hesitating at the top of the stairs, my hand resting lightly against the cool wall. Mason's door was ajar just enough for sound and light to spill through the crack, painting the dark hallway with shifting shadows. The music drifting out was softer here, almost a whisper of the bass-heavy beats that pulsed downstairs. But beneath it, there was something else. A faint, rhythmic sound, tender and oddly fragile, threading through the notes. Curiosity bloomed before I could stop it. At first, it felt harmless, simply a gentle wonder at what Mason might be doing alone while the rest of the house buzzed with noise. I told myself I'd call his name, that I'd knock. But my body betrayed me. Instead, I leaned closer, peering through the narrow gap where the door didn't quite meet the frame. And then the world tilted. There was Mason, sitting on the edge of his bed. The afternoon sun spilled through the blinds in thin, bright lines that wrapped around him like delicate ribbons. His shoulders were bowed, almost protectively. His head dipped low. I watched. Breath caught painfully in my chest as his hands moved slowly, deliberate, trembling ever so slightly. His brow was creased with concentration, lips parted just enough that I could see the subtle hitch of his breath. It took far too long for my mind to process what I was seeing. When it finally did, embarrassment scorched through me so fast it felt like my skin might blister. I should have turned away, closed the door, left him his privacy with a murmured apology. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because what pinned me there wasn't the act itself. It was the sheer, unguarded honesty of it. The raw, unpolished humanity. The way Mason seemed so completely unaware of the world beyond that small space, lost in something that was his alone. In that moment, he wasn't the careful, composed Mason who always had a joke ready, who met every glance with unwavering steadiness. Here, he was vulnerable, soft around the edges in a way that both broke my heart and made it lurch in some dark, aching corner I didn't know existed. Then, as if the universe couldn't bear to let the stillness last, Mason's head lifted. His eyes wide, startled met mine through that sliver of an open door. In an instant, everything shifted. The look that crossed his face was like glass cracking under sudden weight, surprise, confusion, and a hot, unmistakable flush of shame. His hands froze. Mine flew up as though to shield myself from the gravity of what I'd done. And for a breathless moment, the two of us just stared, suspended together in that fragile silence. It felt like the air itself might shatter under the strain.
I'm sorry, he stammered.
My voice sounded thin and unfamiliar, scraping awkwardly out of my throat. I stepped back so quickly I nearly stumbled, my hand catching on the edge of the door to steady myself. Mason swallowed hard, his cheeks burning with a color I'd never seen there before. "It's fine," he said, though the words shook, betraying every effort to sound casual. "Just give me a minute, okay?" I nodded, mute, unable to trust my voice again. I backed into the hallway and closed the door with a care that felt almost reverent. My legs carried me toward the banister, where I gripped the wood until my knuckles whitened. My heart pounded so violently it was almost nauseating, each beat a sharp echo in my ribcage. Guilt tangled around something else inside me, something far more dangerous than curiosity. It was a tender sort of ache, an electric wrongness that buzzed through my veins, telling me that what I'd seen was private, sacred even, and that I'd trespassed. Yet part of me couldn't let go of the image. Mason bathed in that gentle light, vulnerable and utterly human. And maybe, just maybe, I wondered what it would mean if he ever let me see him like that on purpose. No doors ajar by accident, no startled glances. Just Mason, open and unafraid, with nothing between us but breath and the quiet music of two hearts learning how to speak without words. When Mason finally stepped out of his room, he wore nothing remarkable. Just a plain t-shirt clinging to his shoulders and a pair of athletic shorts that hinted at how quickly he'd thrown himself together. But it wasn't the clothes that struck me. It was the way he held himself. Rigid, shoulders drawn tight, as if bracing for impact. His eyes skittered nervously around the hallway, landing anywhere but on me. He stopped at the door frame, leaning against it like he needed the wood to stay upright. For a heartbeat, He seemed almost ready to retreat, to disappear again behind the safety of his closed door. "Sorry about before," he murmured, voice so low I nearly missed it. "It's okay," I answered gently, hoping my softness would bridge the awkward chasm that had opened up between us. "I should have knocked." That earned a small, strained laugh from him, more air than sound, really, but it was something. "I guess we're even now." I tilted my head, surprised. "Even? You don't remember last summer?" His fingers drummed against the door frame in an unconscious rhythm. "The bathroom, you forgot to lock the door." The memory slammed into me so fast it made my face heat. I'd all but buried that day in the vault of personal humiliations. The mortification rushed back, clenching my stomach in a tight fist.
Oh, right.
"I suppose you're right." And for just a second, something miraculous happened. We both laughed. It was fragile and brief, like glass catching the sun before slipping back into shadow, but it was enough. That gentle shared moment knitted us together, eased some of the tension coiled in the space between us. Yet as the laughter faded, it left behind a new kind of hush, something hushed but pulsing. A delicate thread of awareness strung taut between us. Neither of us seemed willing, or perhaps able, to sever it. I found myself drifting to the wall opposite him, leaning against it almost in the mirror of his posture. I tried to look casual, though my heart thudded with a kind of careful hope. "Do you want to talk about it?" The words tumbled out softer than I intended, carrying more vulnerability than I'd meant to show. Mason's eyes finally met mine, startled, then dropped to study the floor as though hoping it might open up and swallow him. One hand rose to rub the back of his neck, a nervous tick I'd come to know as deeply Mason as his shy half-smiles. "I don't know," he admitted after a pause that stretched thin. "It's kind of humiliating." "It's human," I countered, my voice dropping low, intimate. "We all have our awkward moments. All of us." A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips, wry, self-conscious, achingly boyish. "Yeah, but not everyone gets caught by their stepmother." I couldn't help it. I laughed, quiet but sincere. And to my relief, something in his shoulders unclenched.
True.
"But if it helps, I've had plenty of moments I'd like to erase from the universe, too." And so we lingered there, trading faint, tentative smiles, each small grin chipping away at the wall of embarrassment standing between us. Until eventually, Mason's expression shifted, eyes darkening with something heavier. "It's just," he blew out a breath, words seeming to fight him on their way out. "It's hard sometimes. Being around people. I always feel like I have to be someone I'm not. And when I screw it up, when I let it slip, I just hate myself for it." My heart squeezed so tight I thought it might shatter. I pushed off the wall and stepped closer, stopping myself just short of reaching for his hand or wrapping him in the hug my whole body ached to give. "Mason," I breathed, hoping he could hear the truth trembling in my chest. "You don't ever have to be anything other than yourself. Not for me, not for your dad, not for anyone." His eyes lifted, wide and searching, as though he were trying to catch me in a lie. "Do you really think that?" "I know it." He stood there a long moment, gaze locked on mine, like he was hunting for a hidden catch, some secret reason to keep doubting. But then, by degrees so tender they made my breath hitch, his features softened. A slow, honest smile broke across his face, a real smile, unguarded and bright. It seemed to peel years of weight from him, leaving behind someone lighter, almost luminous. "Thanks, Rachel. Really." The way he said it wasn't casual. It carried a raw gratitude that lodged in my ribs and stayed there. And in that fragile, breathtaking instant, I realized, sometimes the smallest exchanges are the ones that matter most. Sometimes healing doesn't look like grand declarations, but like two people standing in a quiet hallway, finally allowing themselves to be seen. Later that evening, with the house bathed in a hush of silver moonlight, I thought the day had finally settled behind us. The walls seemed to breathe slower, the air gentle with that sleepy stillness only night can bring. I was curled on the worn sofa by the window, nursing the tail end of my thoughts, when I heard footsteps on the stairs, soft, hesitant, as if each step was weighed against turning back. Then Mason appeared in the doorway. His hair was tousled, his shoulders drawn tight beneath an old t-shirt. There were shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of restless hours, yet something in those eyes, some fragile glint, seemed brighter, raw with honesty. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured, with a lopsided shrug that was almost boyish. "Me neither," I admitted, and the confession felt like opening a small, private door. His lips twitched into a faint smile. "Yeah." There was no need for more. I simply nodded. "I'd love that." So we found ourselves in the kitchen, standing side by side beneath the soft glow of the pendant light. The kettle's quiet hum filled the silence between us, a soothing backdrop to our shared insomnia. Steam curled up like lazy ghosts, fragrant and warm. When Mason finally handed me the mug, our fingers brushed, and just like that, the night cracked open. A delicate, electric shiver danced up my arm. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. He held onto the mug a heartbeat longer, then exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding something inside for too long. His voice was low when it finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier about not having to live up to anyone's expectations." I searched his face, trying to read the unspoken ache beneath his words. "What about it?" His eyes didn't flinch away. They were steady, but so vulnerable it almost hurt to look. "I've spent my whole life trying to be who everyone else wanted me to be. Honestly, I don't even know who I am without that. It's like, if I stop performing, there's nothing left." A small, broken sound escaped me. Before I knew it, my hand found his instinct deeper than thought. "You're still Mason. With or without the roles. You're more than all those expectations. Even if it doesn't feel like it right now." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, but cracked on the way out a trembling sigh that seemed to carry a lifetime of hidden fears. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not easy," I whispered. "None of this is easy. But you're not alone. I'm here. Always." Something shifted in the quiet between us. When his gaze met mine again, it was like two magnets finally giving up the fight to stay apart. His hand squeezed mine, tentative at first, as if still asking permission. Without a second thought, I squeezed back. And just like that, the world narrowed to this tiny, impossible moment. The creak of the old floorboards beneath us. The warmth of the tea pressed between our palms. The way his thumb began to trace slow, almost reverent circles across my knuckles, as though trying to memorize every small ridge and line. Then Mason leaned in so slight, at first, I thought I'd imagined it. But his breath brushed my cheek, uneven and close, and my heart kicked against my ribs. When his lips finally found mine, it was a hesitant, delicate kiss. A question more than an answer. It tasted like midnight and secrets and something that had been waiting far too long to be spoken. It was wrong, maybe. Or at least, beautifully, dangerously complicated. But none of that mattered in the hush of that fragile moment. Because right then, it felt achingly, terrifyingly right. When we finally parted, neither of us seemed willing to let go. We stood there, foreheads nearly touching, hands still tangled together as if they'd forgotten how to be apart. No words came. None were needed. The silence itself felt sacred, like the soft exhale of the house was holding us close. Somewhere deep inside, where old wounds and timid hopes lived side by side, I felt something stir. A fragile, reckless hope. Because maybe, just maybe, the most unexpected connections were the ones that revealed who we truly were. And even if it would be messy and uncertain, maybe that was okay. Because standing there with Mason in the tender hush of the kitchen, I realized some truths didn't need to be spoken to be understood. We would figure it out. Together. And for the first time in a long time, that thought didn't scare me. It felt like coming home.